Namaste and welcome to today's fireside conversation on music education. My name is Sharan and I'm delighted to be here tonight as your chair on this very pertinent topic. Vicharmanthan, a phrase which means the churning of ideas and thoughts, is an organization that seems to explore key issues impacting British society through a Hindu civilizational lens. Today, we are here to discuss the value of music education. Music, an ancient art form, some would say the first language of expression, has been on decline within the UK over the last decade. It has been said that if trends were to continue, music as a subject across all state schools will cease to exist at an A level by 2033. So what are the benefits of music? Is it necessary to have music within our education system? And if so, who has the mantle to ensure this is preserved and run? To help us answer some of these questions, we have to us with this a very prominent Ustaad Dharambir Singh ji. He's a master sitarist and an MBE awardee. Dharambir ji is a very passionate educator of music. He's been involved across several schools of music, including Leeds University, where he himself taught as a lecturer. He's also been involved in different councils and has been heavily involved in influencing the curriculum of music which is delivered and sharing his passion for Indian classical music. Dharambir ji, welcome to today's platform.
Thank you very much.
Before going on to this discussion, Dharambir ji, I know you have something very special for us prepared regarding a short piece. I'm sure the audience would love to know what this piece is about and really get them into the mood for today's manthan.
Yes, the piece you're going to listen to is a rag, which is the most auspicious rag. All performances begin and end with this rag called Rag Bhairavi. And this was a performance as a tribute to my Ustad, my teacher, Ustad Velayat Khan Sahab at the Bharati Vidya Bhavan in London. And joining me on the stage are two very prominent musicians who are also my students, but they are professional musicians out there, Rupa Panesar and Jasdeep Singh, and my son Kavi Raj and tabla player Sunny Surdarshan Singh.
Thank you so much for that, Dharambir ji. That's an absolute inspiring piece. I'm sure the audience really would appreciate that. And hopefully it's got him into that mood for today's manthan.
different piece. This is Rag Malkons, played in Leicester, and joining on the tabla was Shubhankar Banerjee, who I'm very sorry we lost him in the recently in the COVID. So this was also a tribute to this great maestro. And on the second sitar was Rupa Panessa.
Thank you, Dharambir. I'd like to remind you, the audience, that we'll have a Q&A session, at which point you have the opportunity to post those burning questions to Ustaad Dharambir Singh today. And I really welcome you to put all your questions in the chat below, and we'll try to address as many as we can today during our Q&A session. Dharambir, here's my question to you. Why do you think it's important for us as society to have a better appreciation for music, both at the individual level and in terms of a cultural well-being?
I think my answer to that would be that the whole creation is music. It's a harmony, it's sound, it's vibration. And we've always articulated that Nad Brahma, the Nad as a sound, as a vibration, is the cause of creation. So if you come from that paradigm, you can break it down and see that what is it that is not sound, because there is nothing which is not sound. It's only that they are different degrees. So what we call technically different vibration, which is creating all this amazing tapestry which our cosmos is about. So if I can say that we are hardwired, there's no running away, because that's who we are, and the more we can get in touch with that core part of us, the vibration, and what better than music, which is all playing with the sound.
So that's obviously us being hardwired, and you mentioned this Nad Brahma and us having some kind of a connection with that. But more specifically, what benefits then can that music, that sound then have on us, and then subsequently the society interaction, with our culture, with our well-being?
The thing is at two levels. If you see that the individual, if I compare myself, my body as an instrument, which is what the Indian mystics and the seers used to call this body the Gatra Veena, the veena, or the instrument of the throat. And so if you see that, and if this instrument is not tuned up the way I tune my sitar, my strings actually, beautifully in the way it should be, nothing is going to be created which is going to be beautiful. So a human body is an instrument which needs to be tuned, and the law of resonance, or what we call, the entrenchment, that if you listen to a sound, a vibration, your body slowly begins to vibrate at the same rate. So in a way, music is one amazing tool. It's like a tuning fork, you do that and you find that your body begins to heal itself, or, begins to come into balance. So you can see that at that level, the power of sound and music from the inner and the outer are entangled.
Okay. So given the importance of having this balance, to have a deeper understanding, because it helps, in your own words, tune us as individuals. Let's then take it into the perspective of the average student that is undergoing their formal education. One of the reasons why there's been a decline in the uptake of music, for example, in our formal systems, because there's been a diversion of interest from students away from music as a subject towards other more lucrative opportunities. Why do you think this is the case? Why do you think that students are not appreciating the importance of this music then within our schools?
I think if you look at this phenomena as a mirror of what else is going on, we are at the conversation about climate change. the whole notion of not being in touch with the nature really lost it touch with a part of us, which is actually the trees, the plants, and the animals, which are just part of us, an extension. When you break that link, all kinds of things begin to happen. So if you look at that manifesting in everyday life, where human beings developed singing songs when they were at leisure, singing songs when they were working, and when someone died, they sang songs. When someone new came, they sang songs. It was just part of life. Singing is nothing special. It's just a next notch up to talking. If you can talk, you can sing. If you can walk, you can dance. If you look at the what is happening in the body is the same principles, but it's just that you're holding the sound a little longer, and that becomes a song, becomes a singing. And I think that slowly kind of moving away, and where naturally we're seeing that our youngsters, and including me, everyone, we are more in touch with the iPhone and Samsung, and that's all that is so much in that, and at the expense that quite naturally our attention gets diverted into kind of all that stuff, the technology,
But
and
then,
all
but then,
that.
allow me to present a different view to that then. So,
Sure.
so I appreciate that technology may have diverted some of the interest, and that's obviously something that I'm quite keen on exploring in today's month then.
Yeah.
But it's also allowed us to get a better appreciation of more mainstream music, it's been more accessible compared to perhaps some of the olden times where you're right, we may be able to have singing in everyday life, but to access those key lessons, those key interactions with different forms of music may be more challenging. So why do you think then that the current generation then has not taken upon itself to recognize the value then of this music subject at school?
I think what I was presenting was that because of the change which has happened, our curriculums, our strategies of educating in the school needs to be able to whet the appetite of these youngsters now, and that is a big challenge. The things have changed so much. They've got quick access to things now, which they never happened before. And the other thing is that you must understand there is an active and passive participation in music.
Okay.
The miles of difference between a passive. It's like couch potatoes watching great football, but never moving themselves. Kicking a ball or something. And what a difference! People out there who are training and all that. Look at their bodies and look at how they're sort of acquired strength and resilience and determination. And the passive person might be enjoying it, great entertainment. And the same thing is with music. We can have two aspects where a technology, I can touch a button and the groove starts and it plays nice things, and I can say, wow, that. But having a touch on a flute where your breath is going into that, it's an extension of your body, or a sitar, or a singing, or whatever. It's two different kind of.
So do you think then that there's a more drive towards passive interaction with music rather than active? Is that something you see happening?
And I think the politics and the economic kind of drive is naturally towards economy, per capita income, jobs, and all that kind of a stuff, which means that the measurement of the happiness is seen to be jobs and money and all of that. Whereas this active participation and arts and these things are not malleable, sometimes they're not, but they are more important because a scholar or a PhD or someone can get mental issues and mental health problems, and commit suicides, and which is, I'm sorry to say, seeing more amongst youngsters happening. What is it? What's going wrong?
So,
We've never
that's
had.
something. So that's something.
Yeah.
Sorry, MG. That's something actually I kind of wanted to bring in here, and that, I think that's an important point you've just raised. So you talk about the drive towards other subjects like economics, humanities, science, those things that really drive lucrative career opportunities. What then can music have? Studying music within an ecosystem, what benefit can then that have towards these subjects?
The important thing, if you allow me to say, that the body structure is a multi-layered structure. Okay, we have the physical side of us, and we have the emotional side to us. Then we have the mental, sort of all these thoughts running around, and then we have the energetic part of it. So in the Indian world, they have creatively, split them up, named them up in our yogic systems and all of that. What we're talking here is the balance. Playing sports will give you a muscle and the strength and the physical body. Great, you must do that. So when you look at the pranic, the energy system of our body, the food we eat, what kind of food we eat, and the other kind of activities we do. Similarly, music, what music offers. I'll just quote here Anirudh Patel, who is a pioneer in the music, mind and music studies. He's now published papers, written books. He's phenomenal. I love his work. He's a neuroscientist. And their studies are showing phenomenal kind of things, that they've seen that music is the only activity which lights up simultaneously different parts of the brain. The emotional part of it, and the calculative part, and the intellectual side of it, and they just work together, everyone. There's no other activity. I mean, I'm saying what they have highlighted, which is able to do that. And if you imagine, they found that pre-7 years of age, if a child does music, they've measured the structure of their brain, and the kids who did not have the music in their life at that age, they found that the structure of the brain, the way the neurons have been organized, was so different and that was like the edifice for life, the base which was laid.
Sure, absolutely. Now, you've told us a little bit about the importance there, and you've made reference to some key pieces of benefits that we should have. Music is quite creative. It's an art form that allows us to express ourselves, and each person obviously have their own approach to this. Okay. Do you find that it's difficult then to deliver this creative art form, the ability for us to express within the set curriculum? How does that look like in a formal setting?
As far as my knowledge of the national curriculum, I must say here that my involvement was more in the alternative side of education, which was coming from, the music I brought with me, and involved in the higher education side, where youngsters came because they had made a choice to do music, So that was a different story. But in the national curriculum frameworks and all of that, I see them, brilliantly designed. There is often components of performance. There is component of listening. There's component of composing. Now, the composing totally allows you to be creative, the way you or a student actually is inclined to, And I think this is where good curriculums are, which allow within a certain framework to actually be able to allow that,
So let me contextualize it for the audience out there. So within this country, the government and all the policymakers that are responsible for setting curricula, often these are quite national boards, fund for 3 key stages of education to have music delivered. Now, I guess what I'm more trying to understand is that within this rigid structure of having exams, studying the theory behind music, playing an instrument for months and months on end, and sometimes having to rotate that every semester, is that sufficient enough to allow a student to develop the interest and therefore the benefits of playing that music and really interacting with it? Or is it too rigid that it diverts the attention away from something else that they find more interesting?
I think it's a very complex, the whole setup. We have a beautiful word called sanskar, and the sanskars are accumulative impressions which human being acquires. And for music, in order to have that accumulation, in order to have that environment, where if a student is learning instrument, opportunity to perform, where people are really giving them the boost, they are listening to good music, and they kind of environment is there. And I think what I have experienced is moving to teach into schools when I was a peripatetic music teacher. I was amazed to see the contrast amongst the schools. They're working within the same infrastructures, they're getting the same funding, but some schools not interested. Music and all of that, they would not invest in that side of things. So and yet there were others. It all bogged down to the governors, and it bogged down to the head of the school.
So then why do you think then that those schools who didn't demonstrate those interests, what was the reasons behind, in your experience, for them holding back?
I think it's the professionals who are part of delivery in that are themselves not very artistic people. I think they're too much driven by the other aspects, so they're not looking at it in a very holistic way. When it comes to pressure, the first thing which gets axed is the music and creative arts, and they're not looking at the holistic vision of the well-being of the whole students. And how come some schools do that very well? How come they do that very well? I think the issue is where I found that the outer city schools were where all these kind of extra projects were funded by parents doing fundraising and getting involved in things, because it costs money. And whereas the schools where the parents were not as plugged in, not involved, or didn't have their own means, particularly the inner city schools and the schools which were locked in that, this was lacking. So we do have a picture of a very diverse kind of a thing, and I think the argument for music and other things is no different. It's the involvement, apart from the government funding, bringing this extra dimension, and how many parents' evenings and parents' concerts happening, and what a vibrant culture we've seen in some schools, and in others, none. Dry.
So what you're saying is that it's important then at a school level to create the foundation and the environment to inspire these young children to do. Now, you mentioned something very important right there. You mentioned funding, and something that I will touch on in right now. I think that's quite important. So over the last few years, there's been less and less funds allocated within the schooling system towards creative arts. And one of it is, as you said, includes music. Yet still, the government has done an independent review in which they found, via the Henley report, that there is huge inequalities across music across the board. And that, I think, that reflects what you just said regarding some schools delivering it really well and some not so well. Despite this, there has been greater of £70 million every year now being invested in music. However, this has been done via the concept of musical hubs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with musical hubs, Dharambir. If you do, I would appreciate if you give us some context behind this. Do you think musical hubs is the solution to the government's problem regarding music?
No, it's not the solution, but it's a one good initiative, where the slogan that every child deserves music, giving them an opportunity in life to have a hands-on, the hub was pretty much about that. And great. No doubt that what a beautiful kind of a thing. But to say that that is going to be all and all, no. It can do a great job. Give youngsters, who otherwise would never have access to be able to touch that, and who knows, out of that, whoever comes out and finds that touches their heart, then other lot of systems and things need to then take over and take them into the next phase or next development.
Sure. I mean, can you just for the audience out there who are probably not familiar with musical hubs, are you able to kind of give us an idea of how they work from your experience?
My limited experience, because when the Leicester hub was formed, I mean, I used to attend the meetings because I was one of the directors with the Darbar Heritage, and they were part of that. So I think the idea was that bringing a lot of partners in a common table, so that the expertise was available from, say, Darbar, were seen to be experts in South Asian arts and particularly music, and whereas other organizations who were working with other art forms, and they were, looking at this funding streams which was coming on board. And from the musician's perspective, my wife used to teach on the hub. One of my students used to teach on the hub. They found that in spite of actually offering schools amazing packages, they were struggling because the schools would not take it up. And you see, the reasons for that were very difficult to articulate. And, I'm talking specifically South Asian music, and these teachers were specialists in that. And the assumption made was that because of all the South Asian sort of community here in Leicester, the schools which were 80-90% children from that part of the world would grab this opportunity. But they were actually the worst.
Okay.
Yeah, the people who were more interested was the village schools, and my wife would go visiting those schools,
So why do you think that is? So why do you think that? I mean, look, the 70 million pounds is a lot of money, and every year I'm looking for the last 3-4 years, and it's extending itself. There's a lot of investment into this concept of bringing some musical hubs, different organizations, as you said, voluntary and involuntary charity groups to the table to deliver those key aspects that's missing in schools. Why do you think then that schools just aren't willing to engage with it when it's fully funded?
Again, I've said it's very complex. I mean, for me too, I've only given you from the receiver's end to see what happened, why the head was making that decision, what was going on, what are the pressures there. I haven't myself read any studies on where they've looked at, and I don't even want to comment on the hubs being a failure or the 70 million being wasted. I don't think that would be very wise, because the people in the hubs who are involved are professional people, genuinely passion for art forms and music, and I fully respect and salute their commitment. They are trying their best, and but the pressures and how they work, why something doesn't kick in, the change happening out there. We know that in the Western world, less and less youngsters are interested in orchestral instruments. violin, the flute, and the cellos, and all of that. Um, and it's equally a concern for the wider community, because orchestras are a great part of the heritage. And what an amazing thing, which has taken humanity to polish and reach that finesse. So, but at the same time, we live in a setup where we are given freedom, we've given mechanics of coming together and discussing that, and seeing that how do we address the change of times. But the change is inevitable. And maybe sometimes I think, like music, it's a vibration, means a wave going up and down. So maybe it's the down period, but down is good because then you go up.
So you think that there is then room for improvement, but there is hope then for this to get better?
Absolutely. There's always room for improvement. And, and as a country, apart from looking at the school side of things and being concerned the way you've done your bit of research, don't forget that the contribution of arts to the British economy is huge. England, a small island, has produced Beatles and has produced, umpteen kind of guys who have absolutely done, such a great job globally, and it carries on doing that. That's what is amazing. I just sort of, and there are certain bands I used to meet who only love to live in England because of somehow they get to be able to do that, and their work doesn't sell here. They for work they're performing in Europe, but still.
So I take the premise that, and again, I'll probably echo that with the Henry report that was produced by the government, in which I found it very interesting. They said there's a line that the UK has the best education for music in the world. And I think it goes along the lines where you're saying that the production of key musicians has been amazing within the UK, considering its landmass and form compared to the other global arenas. But then I look at that and I look at another figure which says that it's over 1.5 million students between the age of 5 and 17 have never actually even played an instrument. And that's for me quite a striking contrast. And then I'm thinking to myself, actually, let's look at where these guys are going to have most of their education. And that's why I think we're discussing this. So do you think that the formation of these musical hubs would allow more of these students then to interact better within the community framework in order to produce those musicians that we need?
I think it's definitely one part of the jigsaw, but to say that 2 years of exposure for a youngster, for a kid, will be enough, it's not doable. Because the thing about musical art forms, playing an instrument, the mechanics and the technique development and all takes years. And I think this is where there's a more involvement, but this is a great opportunity, as you've said, to reach out. And and thank God that we are thinking about these youngsters who otherwise won't have access. I feel so touched that at least, thank God, we've reached a point that the very elitism and the rich class only bothered about their kids and all that. At least there is something being broken about that.
So you talk about this. That's I think a reference to socioeconomic status here now, and that's again my next question. So I think you've touched on it nicely there. What about those individuals who can't afford these community programs, these lessons, these instruments? Because they can be quite expensive to have an instrument to for us to engage actively with it. How can these individuals then be represented in these programs?
I think the whole setup of the philanthropy, the whole thing of actually grants and sponsorships and scholarships and all that world is a crucial, very important world. I think one of the things in England, which I know that because we are a welfare state, our arts councils and all the money given to that, and then you expect them actually being able to do everything. And the American model, where Americans actually contribute, and there is no art council real equivalent there, but the model is different. And I think this is where we, all of us, parents, all of us who have the means to do that, more and more of these kind of things need to be creative, where those youngsters, those youngsters who show promise, are not left out, but they are nourished and given
Absolutely.
whatever needs.
Absolutely. Audience members, I'd like to remind you we're shortly coming out to our Q&A session, so please do post your questions below and we will take as many as we can as possible. Dharavinji, we talked a little about access to this music education hubs, access for people who are not as well off, and kind of the system that currently exists within schools. And you commented on they're actually okay, they're good structure and curriculum, but still the figures don't represent what is being said. I'm just kind of understanding here, what responsibility then do professional musicians such as yourselves and those around you, what can they do really then to drive this process of education and reforming it?
I think that as far as my own experience, the only people who created a passion and brushed on their love for music were my gurus, my teachers. And I think all musicians, if they're genuinely coming from that passion, which don't need to be put into words, but it's their relationship to music and the way they exist, it's a contagious thing in a good way, and I think that's where the more these guys are coming from that passion, it will brush onto whoever they interact with. My own experience when we were looking at developing South Asian music in the Leeds was that I realized that there was a huge potential there, but then do I needed to bring in some maestros into the region, and I somehow played luckily partnerships with the local gurudwaras, the Sikh community, and got their help, and they sponsored them. So I got 3 maestros who came down to Leeds, and what a difference! What Leeds have produced in tabla, in sitar, in santoor, in singing. It's just amazing. And I'd always known that the most powerful thing was this maestro figure, who just sends out.
So then there is value then in having maybe regular interactions with musicians, not just South Asian musicians such as yourselves, but even other genres of music to come into schools, potentially to inspire these young students of the value then of music.
Absolutely. And I think that is where these people need to be valued. Their morals could be down, particularly this COVID situation, because of the way they work and kind of do things like that. Schools have an enormous kind of leverage in bringing these people into schools, and they can be a huge inspiration. I mean, I'm all for it.
But then how do schools approach that? So these musicians, naturally, they're quite busy. I'm sure yourself will probably say the same thing. And it's not very easy then to have open access to the time. What can schools do, or particularly what can local communities do to interact with these musicians and get them to come to schools to have that, that have that kind of nice interaction and influence?
I think the first thing is really the desire to have them. I think that's really the start. And the school heads and all, they have the desire. The school governing bodies are very important here, and this is where the parental involvement is the crucial thing in that, because they are the guys who actually give direction. in terms of, how what they want in the school. And I find that, we have so some faith schools now which are coming on with the new government kind of thing, Hindu-based schools and Sikh schools and Islamic schools and all of that. And I'm just amazed at how much, as musicians, I've seen their interaction with musicians is minimal, and that is quite interesting when the premise at which they're set up within their own cultural thing, this thing is actually phenomenal. Whether you're looking at Krishnavanti schools or all these schools, they're talking about their Sanskrit heritage and all of that. But when you look at the music involvement and all of that, they'll go for amateurs rather than getting professionals and understanding that what is the difference between someone. You will not get anyone come in and teach science in a school if they did not have the qualifications. So there are very important things, and this is another important thing. I'm talking more here in the South Asian diaspora. I think in the outer kind of a mainstream, that you can't just go and teach violin if you really did not have your qualifications or
Sure.
or work on the piano. Thank God.
Absolutely.
So
I mean, I can see there's quite a few questions coming through, and I'm quite keen that to take some of them. But that's something interesting. We talk about the qualifications of musicians and how that's delivered. I'm sure that's something we'll touch on in a minute. Darren's asked a very interesting question here. There are a lot of musicians that probably self-taught themselves, quite successful, or equally during the COVID time, individuals that have access to schools and education, they were at home and they were teaching themselves music. Why is it then important to have this music then delivered in school, whereas equally possible to have, let's say, via technology or at home, to be able to learn music and interact that way?
Yeah, you see, the music education word is, again, we cannot be only talking about schools. Education means being educated in all kinds of ways. I mean, I'm attending a Sanskrit course online, and so the way the people are learning and how things are happening can be varied, can be all different kinds of ways, and it does not matter. The thing is that, when our conversation with schools is a different one, because you're looking at the age when they really don't know what to look for when it comes to this music or certain kind of things, and to inspire them. Maybe once they're inspired, YouTube could be a great help for that. So I'm not I don't have any issues with that, because I think it's building up all those sanskars. YouTube, digital things can play amazing part. Online learning now, talking about Indian music is a big thing. There are guys sitting in Chennai, I know of, with 400-500 students in America, and all day long they are sitting in front of a computer delivering sessions one-to-one.
But then is it important that has, so you talk about online sessions as having a teacher there,
yeah,
still delivering some sort of curriculum or some sort of structure to that.
Yeah.
Is it then necessary for then a self-taught musician to have a structure to learn that instrument? Or is it more about creativity and inspiration that they go and...
No, I think the initial stage of you getting, to some stage and some degree, but then getting a musician who is really at that level, who has this very holistic all around, can be a great interaction to really fill in the blanks if there are any gaps, and I think that is very valuable. It's like any other thing, to have a mentor, to have that kind of input, not sort of devaluing their efforts, the self-taught side of things. I've had many self-taught students, but I deal with them very differently,
Sure. I mean, so there's another question here by Layla, and I think it's a very interesting one. So for somebody who's never actually held an instrument or even, interact with it, how can we encourage those individuals to actually actively engage themselves in learning music?
this is where, I would say that the infrastructures, I'm going to talk about England again, and I'm very proud that many cities in England, Birmingham, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, London, Portsmouth Way, and all of that, but Derby, they all, there are arts organizations which are funded by the Arts Council, and they do these kinds of open workshops where people are invited, open days and things like that. So you can see that those kinds of initiatives, more of these infrastructures are needed. We know not every city has one, but the more we have, where they are demanded to put in 10 years plans, strategic artistic plans, so that what is it that they've thought about the next generation, preserving what is there already, and also this global interaction, and where the cultural needs, the individual needs are all seen, and there is a very intelligent way of going about it. And the organizations I was part of in Nottingham set up Leeds organizations. If you look at the plans and business plan, and we have to do all that. There are mission statements. There are like, this is how we're going to do that, and then we value it. Evaluation is critical. It's like a cycle,
Sure,
because the change is inevitable.
sure. Sejal has an interesting question as well. So Sejal says, does it matter what music genre you listen to or you learn? Is there a better one than to I guess to interact with to really drive your development at an early stage?
It's I think this is a thing which the Indian diaspora, where we are now second, third generation down the line, and the more the youngsters are, they want to encourage their offspring, are finding that they naturally drawn more into guitar and piano and singing, English songs and all of that. I feel that no, music is got its it will do its job. Doesn't matter where you're coming from, as far as the expression is concerned, the language is concerned, but having said that, like, you can go and do your Pilates, or if I'm saying it right, will do another kind of benefit. But if you do yoga, it will have another kind of benefit and reach another level of your being. So similarly, I believe that the Indian music was designed almost like a meditation process, where it was in basically designed to bring harmony into you, so that you could become, if I'm use the word, pure, as you develop, as you keep doing music is doing its job. But it was precisely designed with that in mind. So if that is something which is more important, then that is good. But if dancing is more important, then maybe Indian music might not be the best for that. If something else is more important, yeah. But
Absolutely.
I don't think there is a hierarchies, or this is
Okay. Okay.
better or not. Yeah.
Tanya says that she says that it seems as if music education is more structured and robust than the UK. Does it mean that the UK can learn from the across the pond, for example, how they do things? Is there value in changing our current system to reflect other cultural practices?
I believe that when it comes to the policy, and at the crux level of things, where people are at that level of thinking and all that, no one works in a cocoon. They are mindful, because there are studies and there are papers, like any other profession, medical profession or whatever, which are coming out, which are talking about what worked for somewhere, and and then you're bound to be affected by that. So I don't think that it's not being done as appropriate. Things are being done, but you're talking here Europe, which has a common heritage. So they're coming from a Western perspective because their need is to train a musician in a particular way so that they can deliver what their culture needs, whether it's playing in an orchestra or whether it's working with Western harmonies and chords or whatever. That's the language. Of course, you'll have to learn that. So if when it comes to Indian systems, you work with the rags, you have to work with the tals, the rhythmic system, and then within that you kind of do that.
So Dharambirji, what challenges then have you faced? And you've been here for a better part of more than 3 decades now, and you've been actively involved with different musical sectors. What challenges have you faced as a musician, as a passionate educator, as someone who's very proficient in playing instruments, in your journey to influence and preserve? You mentioned South Asian music, but I'm sure there'll be other. You interacted a little with jazz music as well up in Leeds. So what challenges have you faced to try and counter this?
You know what? At one point in my age, I think this question I would have answered very differently. And somehow I don't see anything challenge in a sense. I think challenge as a stepping stone. And thank God there were challenges. Thank God there was opportunity for me to be absolutely, like put like that. And that's the way which triggered in me learning for something new, learning for, because when the days I was working with jazz groups, I mean, I had no idea how jazz worked. The only thing we knew was that it was improvised and our music was improvised. So there was one common ground and off you went. But as you did more work, I still can't relate to the West, the jazz chord changes and which the jazzers do so brilliantly. And when I was working with Shivanova, Priti Penthal, we were working with musicians from around the globe. Put me with a kora player from West Africa. Now, this no idea how they work, we work, but this was something which was a challenge. But at the same time, I found that the one common thing was that I was able to hear it, listen to music, and respond. So this responsiveness, and this is one of the things which is the quality of musicians who are part of the oral cultures, And I think luckily we come from that culture where basically our music is taught orally. Written is just a side thing. And whereas if we interacted with the Western classical musician, they got really because they can only relate with the notation, But generally, I found that, so there were challenges of that sort. And then there were challenges in those days of actually sometimes finding that people did not actually understand the richness of the music, the Indian music, for example, didn't quite able to relate to that because it was different, it sounded different, it felt as if it was going on and on, they couldn't relate to the punctuation marks within that music and all of that. Sometimes, yes, certain remarks would come our way, mostly from other professional musicians rather than from the audiences,
Sure.
And so there's, the little bits of that, but there were not such hurdles that I would, I was lucky that I had opportunity.
That's really great to hear that at least you've managed to see the kind of the bigger picture rather than have those hurdles. And I think that's quite refreshing to hear from someone with so much experience as yourself. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of our question and answer session. We've run out of time, but I can see there are many more questions that have been asked, and I'm sure at some point in time we may be able to pose them to yourself again, Dharambirji. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here today. For your kind of closing remarks and just to kind of end things off, what key messages would you give families who are watching this, who would like to have their kids imbibe in this culture of music and the benefits and reap those really reap those fruits of that. What message would you give them? How would you say they go about encouraging and doing this?
I would say that, but all the parents, particularly youngsters out there, just to be more forceful, just to be more demanding wherever there's an opportunity to have a say in how the music, and also to encourage and make a very positive choice in taking their youngsters, if it needs to be, driving them there, giving them opportunity, and invest in them. It will have great benefits and dividends. So there are communities here, the South Indian community, the Sri Lankan community. See how they have developed Saturday schools, and you've got so much opportunities. The youngsters are involved, and so our community level, we can do great things.
And what about those prominent musician educators, those professionals we just talked about today so far, like yourself, for example? What key message can these prominent professional musicians get involved in order to drive forward this kind of development of music within the UK?
I think I don't know if I need to say anything to them, because the ones I know, they are amazing people, and I look at them and I feel inspired and say I wish I had the same energy level in which they are doing that. I mean, this country, if I'm allowed to say that, right from Pandit Ravi Shankar's daughter Anushka Shankar, she lives in England. And we have the family of the great maestro Ustad Imrat Khan's sons. They live in London. We have the doyen of the Banaras Tabla family, Gharana, Pandit Vishnu Sahai, who lives in England. And people in India die to meet these guys. But we are lucky that they are already, Pandit Sanju Sahai, Vishnu Sahai's student base is huge. Sukhwinder Singh, Pinky, my God, these guys are big shots as far as I'm concerned within the world. And it's only because of them that we are seeing some significant results, in that they are producing performers, because they are absolutely inspirational and contagious in a good way.
So that's really good to hear. So, Dharambir, thank you so much for having us on the platform today. I'm sure those insights you've shared has allowed our audience much food for thought, and hopefully we can carry on this journey of preserving and really influencing our youngest generation towards playing music. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks.
I hope this fireside has given you, our viewers, a chance to evaluate your own appreciation and perspective on music. As Dharambir said, there have been several renowned musicians, not only in the South Asian sector, but even Western musicians that have pledged themselves to become more involved in influencing music education, much like Dharambir has. I encourage you to take your thoughts, your conversations forward to your friends, family, and your own homes, and to keep this month going after we log off tonight. You can continue a dialogue with us via our several usual platforms of social media, in which you'll find the links below. Without our well-wishers, we would be unable to carry on these key conversations on a weekly, timely basis. To become a well-wisher, I encourage you to scan the QR code or visit our Vichar Manthan website, where a small donation can make a very big difference to the work we're doing. Aside from our live discussions, there are a number of other great ways to get involved with Vichar Manthan. Firstly, there are our podcast series in which we explore several key topics in great detail via all major audio platforms. This is a perfect way to interact with us on that long journey home, or when you have a little bit of downtime. We also run fantastic weekly book clubs across the country, and they provide a very warm, friendly space to earnestly explore and discuss key ideas and literature to expand our horizons. Information on this can be found on our website. Our next event will take place on 21st of October on the topic, what is a Hindu? In which we explore what is the definitions of a Hindu and who has the ideas of the Hindu context. In preparation for this, I invite you to go to our website, in which there's a key seminal paper called Who is a Hindu available, and provide some background information around this topic. Look forward to see you next time. Have a great evening ahead. Namaste.